Greetings, salutations, and welcome to the Friday, June 14th edition of the Saints Insider Podcast. My name is Luke Johnson. I'll be filling in the host seat today for Zach Ewing. I've got Rod Walker here with me and Jeff Duncan. We've got a lot of stuff we're going to unpack from the final minicamp practice this week. But first, we are going to hear a message from our sponsor.
Hoop fans, take the court with Caesars Sportsbook. Place your pregame bets now. Build parlays and same-game parlays, then combine them into super parlays for a chance at greater payouts. And with Quick Picks, Caesars turns the biggest stories of the game into pre-built parlays you can just tap right into. So don't just watch basketball. Download Caesars Sportsbook and experience it like never before. Caesars Sportsbook, the only sportsbook app with Caesars rewards.
All right, guys. That was a surprisingly busy day yesterday. A lot of us have just kind of gotten accustomed to the groove and the motion of minicamp. You get up, you get out there, practice right around 11. You go watch some guys run around in shirts and shorts, and then you just write some observations, and it's pretty low key, not a lot to it. And then yesterday, we get news that Juwan Johnson needs surgery. We get news that Taysom Hill's contract is restructured, is one of the last two contracts to be restructured this offseason. And then, as we're waiting to walk out to the practice field, Rod, what do you see out there in the parking lot, in the media parking lot? Let's say, what do you see when you're getting ready to walk out
in the
to
media
practice?
parking lot where players probably
players
not supposed to be parking.
Players park in the media parking. It's not really media parking. It is just
public
parking at the Saints facility. We've been kind of booted out, but that's a talk for another day. Yeah. But you're out there in a place that media is known to congregate, and who do you see?
And I just happened to be out there because I got a phone call, so I walked outside, which is really weird. So anyway, I saw Alvin Kamara. He's not in his Saints uniform, and it's time for practice we're about to go out and watch practice, and you see Alvin Kamara heading out to his car and not in uniform. So that, we kind of tipped us off to something's going on here.
Yeah. So busy, interesting day yesterday. Obviously, if you've been unless you've been living under a rock, you know that Alvin Kamara skipped out on minicamp practice yesterday. We found out that really after Rod saw him out in the parking lot, we did some calls and found out that this was a contract-related absence. So we're going to dig into that today, guys, and we're going to kind of look at it from every angle. But your first, before we get into why this is something Alvin wants, why this is something the team is kind of resisting, what were your first kind of reactions when you heard when we figured out exactly why Alvin wasn't in practice yesterday?
For me, it was I was surprised mainly because we had seen him there the first 2 days of minicamp, and we had talked to him that first day, which was Tuesday, and you could tell how excited he was about the offense. He seemed really, fired up about being in his offense. He wasn't here for the OTAs, which were involuntary, but. So, I was just surprised because the first 2 days went so well, and he seemed in a good place. The team was all excited that he was back. Surprise would be the first thing for me.
Yeah, look, I think it's unusual. That's an unusual move to be there at the building, go through the walkthrough, and then leave. That's obviously intentional, strategic on his part, and we just haven't seen a lot of that lately. And I think the thing that makes it significant is this offseason, everything's been pretty positive. And not that this is a huge negative, but it's something. It's a distraction, if you will, and a strategic distraction by Alvin's camp. But, everything had just been sailing along until this point. And then including the things you mentioned, Juwan Johnson's injury, coupled with this, I think it's the first kind of bumps in the road we've seen so far.
And just to be frank here, he put Dennis Allen in a pretty tough spot yesterday because Dennis knew he was going to be I'm sure he knew he was going to be asked questions after practice about why his star running back wasn't there. We broke the news right after practice ended, or right about the time practice ended, that it was contract related. Dennis had he was in a tough spot because he didn't really have much to say, and he came out kind of looking bad.
And that's the kind of thing that I know Mickey Loomis over the years, that's the kind of thing he does not like. He does not like the organization being put into a position where they look bad. Now, if I'm Alvin Kamara in his camp, who cares? That's,
Yeah,
we're,
so be it.
Yeah, we're cutthroat. We're negotiating a deal. But I'm telling you, Mickey does not cotton to that. I mean, he does not feel like deals are going to get done that way. I guarantee you he had a conversation with Alvin's agent saying, look, we'll get a deal done. Let's do it behind closed doors. That was monkey business. That was BS. I guarantee you he said that. So it'll be interesting to see if they overcome that, because I'm telling you, Loomis can have a short fuse on things like that. And you're exactly right. It made the organization look like they didn't know what was going on. And I think the timing of it, because of what you talked about, the fact that we broke it, so there's so little time between when our social media posts got up and DA talked, that maybe they didn't prep him or something. He should have been prepped.
I don't know if he was. Yeah, because I
don't know if he was either.
It was like a 2-minute window if that long.
Right.
By the
Right.
time-
So I think he just looked bad.
Yeah, and look, it was a really, I don't know what Dennis was supposed to say yesterday, but like him getting up there and saying, I don't know why he's gone, I haven't talked to him, it's a bad look for the head coach.
Yeah, no doubt.
Okay, so let's get into this whole situation, and we're going to look at this from both sides, because the reality is Alvin wants an extension with the team. He has 2 years remaining on his deal, but effectively it's 1 year remaining on his deal. Mm-hmm. Next year he's due a $22 million base salary. None of that is guaranteed. His cap number is $29 million. Alvin knows, the Saints know, his agent knows that's never going to happen, especially with the position the Saints are in. So if they were to release Alvin Kamara theoretically next year, they'd have a $10 million dead cap hit, but they'd clear $19 million in cap space. That would happen if he played this year and was going into next year. There's no way he's playing under that contract. So if you're looking at this from Alvin's perspective, he's got effectively 1 year left on his deal, and he wants a new deal. Mm-hmm. He wants a new deal in New Orleans. He's said before that he wants to stay here in New Orleans. And then if you look kind of across the league, you see the contract that Christian McCaffrey signed. Look, obviously Christian McCaffrey has been a much more productive player lately, but he's in kind of a similar position to Alvin. He just signed a third contract, which you don't see a lot in the running back market these days. He was in the same draft class, roughly the same age as Alvin Kamara, and he got a 3-year extension that makes him the highest paid running back in football. But really all that was a little extra money in what would have been the last 2 years of his deal, and then a third non-guaranteed year in the contract. So that kind of seems like it would be like the framework of a deal that Alvin Kamara and his representatives are kind of looking at as an example to go off of. So let's get into Alvin Kamara's side of this. So, what exactly do you think he's trying to accomplish here? What is he looking for?
I think the main thing is, and Alvin, he actually mentioned this the other day, is how, he said he talks to McCaffrey. I mean, I don't think they're best friends, but I mean, they communicate. And I think, like you said, he wants to get something similar. And I think Alvin feels like, especially in Kubiak's offense, I think he feels like he can probably put up some McCaffrey-like numbers. And if he can do that, then that's going to be what he's going to take to the bargaining table, I would imagine. So, I mean, I just think he feels like he's got a little bit more than what we've probably seen the past 2 years. But it's going to be a matter of him proving it, or if the Saints believe that he can actually do that.
Yeah, and it's also security beyond this year, right?
Right.
Because I mean, he turns 29 next month. The
second day of training camp.
The market for running backs of that age is not very good,
right,
as we've seen. So I think it makes sense from his standpoint to try to get this done as soon as possible, because you just never know what it's going to look like beyond tomorrow.
Yeah, at that position, it's a collision position. And guys, when they reach 30, typically do not get second deals. I mean, or another deal, at least a multiple-year deal. So, I mean, we saw what happened in New York with Saquon Barkley. They moved on from him, for similar reasons. I think the difference is, in looking at it from the Saints' perspective a little bit, I know we were going to go to that. I understand Alvin. He's wanting security. I get it. If you're the Saints, though, the difference, I think, in the deal with McCaffrey is, I think the 49ers are in a window where they're in a different place than the Saints, much different. I mean, they're like a Super Bowl contender, and he's an MVP level player. So that those two things make this completely different. Whereas Kamara's numbers have been declining the last couple of years, and the Saints are in a transition phase. So I just feel like the organization's in a completely different spot than the 49ers. If the Saints were in the Breeze era, getting knocking on the door every year, then I think they go all in. But they're not. I don't think they're in going all in mode right now.
Right, and I mean, just being real here, McCaffrey had about 1,000 more yards from scrimmage and about 12 more touchdowns than Alvin Kamara did last year.
Yeah, he was an MVP candidate for a long time. A lot of people thought he might win the MVP.
If the award wasn't just a quarterback award, which is what it's become,
Right.
I definitely think he would have been the MVP last year. He was the best player in football last year, statistically. But also, if you're Alvin Kamara, even when you're in your down year, and it was a down year, I think you can point to running backs are one of those positions where you are not working completely independent of everything else. You need functioning offensive line play. You need functioning quarterback play. You need functioning play calling. Mm-hmm. And I think you could point at all three of those things at various points in the last 3 years as not being up to snuff for the Saints. And when you're looking at his down year, it's still 1,200 yards from scrimmage in 13 games. It's still 6 touchdowns in 13 games. And you could reasonably expect those numbers to improve if everything else improves around him. So, I totally get Alvin Kamara wanting to get something done as soon as possible, because he's still a productive football player when he's not at his peak. But I think we have to look at this from the Saints' perspective, and I think this makes a lot of sense from the Saints' perspective to be a little hesitant on this, and to have some reservations about getting a deal done, because as we've discussed, he turns 29. The shelf life for running backs, even for players like Alvin Kamara, who are not just a traditional running back who offer a lot in the passing game, the shelf life for a running back is you get beyond 30, and it's really hard to find productive football players. And then you're also talking about what is he going to look like in this new offense? Nobody really knows. They've only seen him for 2 practices in this offense. So let's get into that. If you're the Saints, what are your reasons for just kind of being hesitant on an extension here, on keeping Alvin here for another 2-3 years?
I think it's less to do with Alvin than it is maybe the position. Do you really want to commit? Because that's significant money they're talking about. If you're talking about Christian McCaffrey's deal, even something close to that, significant. Do you really want to invest in that?
For the next 2 years, Christian McCaffrey is going to make $16 million a year.
Right. And I think roughly the APY for Kamara is around 15, right? Something
it was
like
a 5-year, $75 million deal, but really he's made 12 or 13 for most of that.
Right.
Because the number goes way up in the last year.
Right. So, but say roughly he's 12, 15 million average per year. If you look at that over the cap, I tweeted that out today, the over the cap valuation, his value compared to the other backs in the league has been around $5 million, his performance per year. So that's if I'm the Saints, I'm looking at it going, we're paying this guy 12 to 15 million a year, and we're getting $5 million value. That's just how the reality of how the NFL works. What's your value? What are you producing? And so I'm sure Kamara's camp is saying, yeah, well, look at the things Luke said. You had a crappy offense. The offensive line was bad. We're going to produce a lot more in this new scheme. But then the Saints might say, well, let's wait and see. I think that's probably where they're at. I don't know how they solve that. And if I'm Kamara, I may be saying, well, look, if you're going to cut me next year and I'm going to be a cap casualty, I want to know now. Why do I want to be all in and play at this position where I can get hurt and really hurt my value on the open market as a damaged goods? I mean, that's kind of where Mike Thomas is at right now, right? It's exactly what happened to Mike. He got hurt, and now he's on the market, and I'm sure his market's not what he wanted, or at least thought would be a year ago. That he wants to avoid the Mike Thomas situation. So that's why they're, I think, pressing the envelope right now.
And I think another side of it is, last year the Saints drafted Kendre Miller, and we saw some flashes toward the very end. I mean, Kendre Miller dealt with a lot of injuries last year, but toward the end, I guess it was the Falcons game and maybe another game. But, he looked like he was a guy that could possibly be what Kamara has been. And, So for the Saints, I mean, you got this young guy who I don't know how old Kendre is, but
He's very young. I think he's 20 for most of his rookie year.
Right.
Yeah.
So you got this really young guy that if you can get even close to what Kamara get for obviously a much cheaper price, I mean, you might just take that chances on that instead of rolling with this guy who's about to turn 29. So I can definitely see both sides of it. But I do think, I just think Kamara's, I don't think his talent has dropped off as much as some people. I just think in this offense, I would kind of like to see what he can do in this offense.
I think the other thing is Alvin. I would say, I don't know how y'all feel about that. I think he might be the most popular player on the team.
I think
if he's not the most,
I think he's
100%. Yes.
Yeah. So like here you have a team that's struggling to get fan support right now. Season tickets are down. You're going to move on from maybe the most popular guy that you've had for a long time, who's done everything you've asked of him. I know he had the transgression last year, got suspended, but for the most part, he's been, a company guy, a leader in the locker room, all the things you want. Typically, Mickey Loomis rewards that, and they did with a second contract. But I do think because of where the organization's at, that's what makes it more complicated.
So let's actually dig into this a little bit before we move on. I want to talk a little bit about like who has the leverage here, right? Because that right there is part of Alvin Kamara's leverage.
Right.
He's very, very popular with the fan base. He's a very visible part of this organization. And then on top of that, this is, like, as he knows, this is a make or break year for this staff. And I was talking to Eric McCoy the other day. He said he is our best offensive player. Mm-hmm. They need him if they are going to reach whatever level they're gonna hit this year. They need Alvin Kamara to play and play well. So that's Alvin Kamara's leverage.
Yep.
Right.
And they don't know what they have behind him.
Correct.
They like
right.
Kendre Miller, but we don't really know.
Yeah, you have to say
so
that.
what are you going to do if you don't have me?
That's right.
Run Taysom Hill every time? That's maybe the answer. I don't know.
But then on the flip side, the Saints, if they say like, okay, don't play this year, you're going to lose all your money, you're going to get fined, and then Alvin is 29 and he's had a couple down years and he hasn't played. Well, what's his market going to be? I think that's some strong leverage for the Saints if they're willing to hold their ground here.
I think, the only resolution I see is maybe trading him for both sides.
Yeah, but what are you going to get? What are you going to get for a 29-year-old running back?
Be happy.
Yes.
But that's the only resolution I see where, okay, Alvin, you want to play a contender, and I know if one thing about Alvin, he shows his emotions wears them on his sleeve. Last year, he was not a happy camper because they were losing.
Yep.
And he was frustrated. He wants to win, like all players, but especially a guy of that caliber. And I think you could sell him on going to another. He'd be a great fit on a Super Bowl contender right now. You could sell him on that, even though I know he wants to be here and doesn't want to leave. That would be the only thing I could see where the Saints could move on. It happens around the league all the time. The Saints, for better or worse, are very loyal to their players, sometimes too much, I think. They're not as cutthroat as a lot of organizations. And in this instance, I think they've got a tough decision to make because I don't think they can afford to commit long-term to a player at that position. If they do, they're going to end up with another bad contract. How many of these we've seen? Andres Pete, Cam Jordan, you could argue, is not a good deal right now. There's a lot of these kind of things that are hurting this team from, I think, maybe going forward.
The only thing I would say pushing against that is trading Alvin Kamara. You're just essentially cutting him a year early because you're not going to get anything back in compensation. And with it being such an important, I do think that he's going to be a huge part of this offense, especially just with his skill set within this scheme. Like Christian McCaffrey was MVP level last year in this scheme, and he does you could argue he does a lot of it better. But Alvin Kamara does a lot of the stuff that Christian McCaffrey does. I think it's interesting who has the actual leverage here and who's going to hold firm the longest. Because I don't see a trade happening just because it would have to be a desperate team.
I think it'd have to fall apart too. Like relations would have to fall apart.
Yeah,
I don't think that's going to happen.
I do think Alvin would probably hold out long. I just think he's the kind of guy that. We know he likes playing football, but Alvin's a little different. Like
Very much.
if he didn't play football, I think he'd be fine. Yeah, I mean, he has other stuff that he's doing as a kid now. So I don't know if football is like, I think he'd be fine with that.
Yeah, football is important to him, but it's not. It's like he has other interests in his life and other things that he could do, to where like if he feels the need to make a principled stand,
Right, I think he would do it.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if he holds out to start training camp if they can't get progress. I mean, he's the kind of guy I can definitely, just out of principle, he's going to say, you know what, I've done everything I can for this organization, and they're not meeting me halfway on this. But I actually think they'll get this something worked out. I mean,
I think so too.
Both sides should have motivation to make it work. And Alvin's such a popular player, and I know how much they value him. You could hear the teammates, coaches. I mean, he's one of the most respected players they've had here in the last few decades. I mean, this is not just your normal negotiation.
Yeah, this is a guy that doesn't even. I mean, he didn't come to OTAs. Like, he's Alvin. Like, nobody cares.
Right.
It doesn't bother anybody. He's not there because they know how good he is. They know how much he means to the offense. So, yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that.
And, and going back to your point about him being a focal point of the offense, I mean, we only saw him for 2 days, but, I mean, he was heavily used. I mean, it was him and Taysom a lot. And, I allowed myself to think that's going to be fun to watch, Right. Those two guys will create a lot of problems for how you defend because they're both so versatile and they're both so talented. I mean, not a lot of teams have two guys like that they can use that have the ability to catch balls and play multiple positions. And I think Clint Kubiak's figured out, okay, I know they got good receivers. Shaheed's looked good this camp, so is Olave. But I think those two guys end up being the focal point. And then the passing game complements the running game.
If you take Alvin out as the offense, I'm just not as confident in what they can do without him. Or Taysom, but especially Alvin.
So, like, okay, I'm just going to throw this. Before we move on, I just want to throw this out. Like, if I think him getting a raise, like, on the $15 million APY is probably unlikely.
I agree.
Right?
I think that's where the problem is probably.
So, but let's say he asks for like 3 years and $40 million, right? With no guarantees in the final, like very similar to McCaffrey's, except like a little bit less than the APY before. Would you do that?
I wouldn't, but I could see the Saints doing that.
It's like 13.3 a year.
I think if I'm Dennis Allen and I want to keep my job, I think I'd probably do it because I just think you got to be all in on this season. And I mean, a lot of risk involved with that, but I think I probably would.
Could you get a happy medium there? Could you get, like a 1 year extension on that? I don't know.
I don't think he wants to do a 1 year extension.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I think that's. I don't know where they get the resolution on this. It's gonna be interesting to see.
It will be. I do think I agree with you that some sort of agreement's gonna come.
I do too.
I'm just really curious to see what that actually looks like. All right, we've spent enough time talking about Alvin Kamara. The other big news from yesterday was Juwan Johnson needing foot surgery. That surgery is going to happen, I think, next week. He is expected to miss at least some of training camp, if not most of it. But according to the ESPN report from Adam Schefter, the expectation is that he will be back for week 1. So let's talk about this because he is, even though he had a disappointing season last year when a lot of us expected him to take off, he is an important player in this offense. He's their starting tight end. So without him being there for training camp, what does this mean for both for Juwan Johnson for the start of the year and for the Saints who have to try to kind of backfill that in the lead up to the season? Like who are people who may be able to kind of pick up some of the slack there?
I mean, I don't think they have really anybody on the roster like him.
No.
No,
he is a unique player.
Right.
I mean, obviously, he's a college receiver, put on a lot of weight to play tight end, good weight to play tight end. He's a really good athlete for a tight end for that position. And I don't think there are a lot of guys like him around the league. Obviously, I'm not saying he's like the best tight end in the NFL, but like he's a unique player. Mm-hmm. And they don't have that on the roster right now.
Right, because, I mean, Foster Moreau is a solid role player, but he's not the receiving threat that Juwan Johnson is. Juwan Johnson's a guy who can get behind the second level and make a big play downfield.
Yeah.
We see him do that a lot.
He's their move tight end, and Foster's more their traditional
Right.
Y, their inline tight end.
Right. So, I mean, I think you go to what's the undrafted rookie? Your guy.
Dallin Holker.
I mean, to me, that's the guy they clearly are starting to position because he's a very similar style player, more of a move tight end, F-back kind of guy. I think he's valued higher than maybe most people realize, especially because now with Juwan's injury. But do you want to go into a season on an undrafted rookie free agent? I don't know. I mean, that's the question I think they have to answer. Do they bring? I know they worked out some tight ends the other day, some veteran tight ends. So that's the position to watch for sure.
Well, let's quickly just get into what this means for Juwan.
Yep.
For let's say he is back for week 1, but he only gets like a week of training camp. Like, what would the reasonable expectation be for him, playing wise in that first, month of the season? Because as we've seen, I mean, when you got guys taking this long layoff during the time when they're supposed to be building up their bodies into football shape, it can take them a while.
Yeah, I mean that's a big concern for this team, and that's why I think a guy like Hulk is going to have to really, or whoever it is. But I mean, he did make some good catches in practice yesterday, and I know it's just practice, but Juwan missing this time and that's kind of puzzling. Well, not puzzling, but like Dennis said, he didn't really know like
Right.
when it happened or where. Like what,
Yeah, he said it wasn't like
with
he
an
said it
event.
wasn't an event, which means like it wasn't
don't know.
like it wasn't like he was running around in practice and noticed something in his foot and had to stop. It meant he was noticing something bothering him in his foot. They got it checked out, and they're like, "You need surgery."
Right. And to me, those injuries are always kind of tricky when somebody just sort of doesn't know when he tweaked it. It just kind of happened. Like you wonder if it's something, maybe something even more serious than you think. So it's a concern. And, Juwan's a guy that this team was counting on last year. I mean, we all thought we thought he'd put up.
I thought he'd have 80 catches for like 950
He ended
yards
up having
last
like
year.
36, 37. whatever.
Yeah, averaged less than 10 yards a catch. I think only 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, but he was a guy that it was clear in training camp last year that Derek Carr really trusted him, and they connected a lot. So that's a big chunk of his offense that we'll be missing if he's not there. Somebody's gonna have to fill in for him.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about Dallin Holker. Why do you like his game?
Well, I guess it actually goes back to, I keep talking about the game when they played Colorado when he first kind of got.
Yeah, he was a stud in that game.
Yeah, but I mean, I went back just to watch some of his other film. They played like a game at Air Force. It was in the snow, and he just made these crazy catches in the snow. He caught the Hail Mary against maybe Boise State. I can't remember, but he just seems like a guy that just always seems to make plays. And sometimes you need those kind of guys. And he's a guy that he didn't get drafted, but there were people that had him projected to go in like the 6th or 7th round. I mean, so it's not like he's just some unknown guy. So I think the Saints may have really gotten a steal out of this guy. So we'll see how he pans out. But
And-
he made a lot of big plays in college.
Well, and significantly, right, they gave him a huge,
Yeah, I think
Right,
it was like
get the
200 and
you don't do that.
230, 200.
$230,000
Yeah.
guaranteed signing bonus. Like, you don't do that unless you consider. And I think I saw the other day where Clancy Barone said he's like our 8th round draft pick.
Yeah.
They consider him like a draft pick. So I think you're right. He's not your normal UDFA.
But let's get into why he was undrafted, right?
Right.
The Saints are a team that's big on the prototypes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he probably wasn't drafted by them because he's undersized.
Yeah, he's not that big.
According to their prototypes. And, he's a really accomplished receiver as a tight end of the college ranks. But, I think you could make the argument that, his blocking is probably not up to the NFL standard, right? Which is going to be, I think, Dennis Allen references yesterday, that's going to be something they pay a lot of attention to once the pads come on in training camp. See if he can actually do that side of things.
Well, he's built more like Taysom Hill than, say, Foster
Right.
Moreau. He's kind of like that. So I think the problems you run into, this happens all over the league, is when he's in the game, everybody knows he's not going to be blocking. They're not going to probably be running. It's going to be a pass. So, I mean, that's how defenses work, right? So how do you get past that? in this modern era. But he definitely is a playmaker. I mean, and he is working in with the ones all the time. This is unusual. You don't see that very often of a guy with that kind of inexperience already up with the ones. They clearly value him, and I don't think they have really many other options. And I know we haven't talked about Jimmy Graham, but there's been a report out there that Jimmy Graham's leaving it open. But Jimmy Graham isn't that player, right? He's not Juwan Johnson at this stage of his career. So I think
Jimmy Graham is closer to Foster Moreau at this stage of his career than Juwan Johnson.
Yeah, so it doesn't. I can see where it might not make sense, but you never know. Too, they signed him late last year. So maybe they wait and let the old man, have his off season and bring him in. I don't know.
Let him go do his 500-mile bike ride and sail on his boat Flight Risk.
Right.
Get some time to just chill out, and then be like, hey Jimmy, come back in. We're gonna target you 8 times this year. See if you can catch 6 touchdowns.
I do think that losing Juwan Johnson, when you start looking at the offense, and we've been out there every day, I mean, the main playmakers have all been, like we talked about, the 2 backs, the two receivers, and Juwan Johnson. That's like the 5. I mean, I don't think
where does Taysom Hill work in that?
That's what I'm saying. The 2 backs,
Alvin and Taysom.
Alvin and him.
Okay,
and then Juwan.
So we gotta like. We got to clarify when we're talking about Taysom Hill's position here. Is he a back? Is he a tight end? Is he a quarterback?
Yeah, he's kind of
slot receiver.
I will say this: I don't think we were talking in practice the other day. Like, I think the gadget guy thing's going to be out the window. I think he's going to play a lot of snaps this year. Taysom.
I agree.
He's lined up a lot. I think he's
going to be a regular part of the offense.
And take the governor off of him, man.
Yeah, I think it's smart. I think it's really smart. But I don't think he's going to be. Like he was in the past where he disappears for 3 or 4 plays. I mean, he's going to be out there a lot. Yeah. I think that's smart with the way this offense runs.
Regular Saints Insider podcast listeners will know I am for this idea.
I know.
Okay, one last guy I want to talk about with Juwan Johnson, Michael Jacobson.
Yeah, that's my guy.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm just like a soft toss to you.
What do you think about like his ability? I mean, he's also a former basketball player, not very big.
Well, he's big. He's big in the sense that he's tall.
Well, yeah, he's 6'6", 6'7", and he's made a lot of plays, and they do go to him a lot. I mean, I think they like those 2 guys. Do they like them to be a key role this year?
That's the question.
Right.
Yeah, I think they could be a capable fill-in for a game or 2, while Juwan Johnson's like working his way back in. But like, I don't think they're guys you want to be counting on at least right now. For a 17-game season.
You made a good point at practice yesterday of like there's some Dan Arnold in him. So just envision that, right? Dan Arnold filled in, had a few good games for the Saints, but like that's not the guy you want being your guy.
Right.
But he can step in and for a few games, and that's what he did for the Saints. So I think that's a very good comparison. Like you want something a little better long term.
Yep. Okay.
I wasn't expecting the Dan Arnold reference on this podcast, but
And Dan Arnold, also my guy. I think he got unjustifiable hatred from the Saints fan base for not coming down with what would have been a crazy touchdown pass in the NFC Championship game. That would have, like, everybody's like, you'd say like, oh, he dropped the ball, like get him off the team. I'm like, man, if he would have caught that, people would have lost their minds. It would have been a crazy catch.
I will say this,
and Dan Arnold was killing himself after that game,
and
too.
He carved out a pretty decent career for himself.
Yeah, he sure did. For a guy coming from D3 UW Platteville.
Yeah, I went to Arizona for a while and then Jacksonville, I think.
I think he was actually traded by Carolina to Jacksonville. Somebody wanted to trade for him. So,
I will say this. I don't know if you're going to talk at all about on-the-field stuff the other day, but that catch by A.T. Perry I thought was the best play of the entire minicamp.
Okay, so Jeff is referencing, I think it was Nathan Peterman, a quarterback, maybe.
Or Rattler, one of those 2.
Yeah, I'm actually having a hard time keeping 10 and 18 straight in those practice jerseys. Even though they look completely different as players. But A.T. Perry, they were running a goal line 7-on-7, and A.T. Perry just like completely mossed. I think it was Rajon Wright.
Yes.
And it was like back of the end zone. The ball was thrown pretty much right at Rajon Wright's head, and A.T. Perry jumped over his back and like plucked it out from in front of his head. And that's like the kind of stuff that you're like, oh man.
Wow, yeah.
He could be great for this team. That was his second one in 2 days. It was the day before he had another one on the sideline in a full team drill. I think that one definitely was from Nathan Peterman. But in the same vein, you see A.T. Perry make those like big splash wow plays, and then you talk to Dennis Allen about him, and he's like, he needs to improve literally everything he's doing.
Yeah, got a long way to go, kind of thing. Yeah, and so I think when you hear that kind of unsolicited, there's things going on that they're not quite comfortable with him stepping into that role. But man, that was a play. I mean, and you could see and tell by the reaction by the players. I mean, that was one of those like you don't see that very often. The reaction from both sides of the ball.
And maybe this is just the sort of thing where they've got like a talented young player who's obviously got some big time skills, but like they need him to do like the pro thing, like be a pro and focus in on all these little details that are going to take you from being a talented young player who's like, I got a bit role in this offense to being somebody who's actually you're able to count on for 40 plays out there to be like the true number 3.
Yeah, I mean, the playmaking skills are obviously there, and I don't know what the things. I don't know if it's.
Yeah, I mean, like
we
we're
don't
not
know what it is. Yeah.
We're not sitting there watching the film, and we're not watching A.T. Perry like literally on every play and seeing like what he's doing right and wrong. Is we don't know what the play call is. We don't know like what the specifics are that they're looking for. But obviously, there's something there they want to see more.
Yeah, they want to see more of it, and this is a guy that we kind of talked about stepping up and being Michael Thomas. I mean, he's not Michael Thomas, and I don't want to get anybody's expectations up, but they need a guy that they can really count on to make plays consistently, like that kind of play that he made yesterday, and so that's what he has to do.
Yeah, is he going to be Traquan Smith, or is he going to be like, like their true number 3? I think that remains to be seen with him.
I mean, who would you say is number 3? I don't think they have.
I think right now it's Cedric Wilson.
Yes.
Almost by default, though. It feels like this is what they signed him to be.
Yeah.
Maybe hoping somebody would supplant him, but I don't think anybody has.
Yeah, I mean, I think number 3 might still be out there.
Right. Good point.
Okay, we've kind of gotten a little bit off the rails. Let's just like hone it in for this last little segment here. Look, we've seen 3 OTA practices. We've seen 3 minicamp practices. What are kind of your, as we're heading into this long summer here, I think 5.5 weeks until training camp starts. Mm-hmm. What's kind of your thoughts on the team right now? What's your vibe check here? It kind of feels like it kind of changed yesterday a little bit.
Yeah, I would say it changed. I mean, I think, and it's always a lot of positivity this time of year anyway, but I think yesterday the stuff with Alvin, obviously. Then just the injuries that popped up. I mean, like Tano, we weren't really expecting that one a couple of weeks ago, and we found out he's out, and now Juwan Johnson. So, I mean, it's kind of just kind of conflicting, a little bit more conflicting now because there was all these positive vibes, and now you kind of got this stuff kind of hanging over the team like a cloud. So, just which way it goes is to be determined, I would think.
And it's hard to buy in. I hate to say it this way, but it's hard to buy in with Derek Carr because, I mean, the guy we know now after having covered him for over a year, he is Mr. Sunshine and Rainbows, isn't he? I mean, he was like that in his press conference the other day. I mean, everything's great, loving it, but he's definitely all in. He feels like, and he's had a good camp, but he had a good camp a year ago as well. You made a good point about the injuries. Like, I'm a little worried personally about Chase Young. I think that's a guy that they're counting on, and I think he's got a ways to go. I know he's going to get clear. I think he got cleared by his checkup, but I think he's got a ways to go to get in shape, for the start of camp, and they're counting on him to be that, guy off the edge. So there's a lot of questions, right? Yeah. Juwan Johnson, the offensive line, all these new players. There's just a lot of things that have to come together for this team to where I could see with that early schedule, as difficult as it is, I could just see it being a tough start, despite all the reasons for optimism, because you hear it when you talk to the players. I mean, the guys are all in. And I will say this, we've talked about it on the pod before, for installing a whole new offense and all the things that go with it, there's a lot of moving parts of that offense. They've been pretty clean offensively. I mean, you just don't see a lot of sloppiness out of them. They've had some interceptions and things like that, but the ball's not on the ground a lot. And for the most part, I think it's been a clean operation, and that speaks to the coaching staff and the offensive leaders.
I think Clint Kubiak is going to be an excellent addition to this team as long as he knows the right buttons to push as a play caller.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to him, building a scheme and getting the guys to understand it and getting the guys to operate it well, I think he's already shown that he can be that, right? And we've heard just nothing but like glowing reviews of Clint from everybody you talk to on the offense. Everybody's excited. But like, I think Pete Carmichael really knew what he was doing. I think he's probably underrated for how smart of a coach he was and how good he was at building a game plan. But when it came time to like call plays in the game, when everything's flowing at once, like it did not work. So like, I think we got a reason to be excited about this offense and what it can be, because we've all seen it. It looks really good right now.
Yep.
For all the qualifiers that you need with no pads and no pass rush for a lot of it, it looks good. Can he pull the right levers and push the right buttons in the right situations remains to be seen.
And Carr, can he do it? I mean, when I see Derek Carr, I see a guy, you can see the talent, all the things that made him a first-round draft pick and a franchise quarterback.
Second-round pick.
Second-round pick and a franchise quarterback. But then we saw last year, like in the big games, like I need to see Derek Carr have his big game against when they go on the road and play the Cowboys.
Light up the Chiefs' really good defense with Steve Spagnuolo.
Yeah, like do that. Then you got something. I mean, that's what we haven't seen yet, and maybe that happens in this scheme.
And for me, it's just, I know I keep talking about it, and we've all talked about it, but I'm just still not sure about the offensive line. I mean, they look, they're not blocking anybody out there, so everything looks good, but, we want to see what Trevor Penning can actually do when he's lined up against somebody. We need to see what Boaga does lined up against somebody. He's a rookie that now is all of a sudden playing left tackle, so we got to see how all that shakes out. And because if that doesn't work, none of it's going to work. I don't care how good Derek Carr is. I don't care how good Alvin is. I don't care how good Taysom is. The Lions going to have to do well.
Week 2, they're going to be going to Dallas, and you're going to have DeMarcus Lawrence and Michael Parsons, and they're going to go right at Trevor Penning. He's going to have to prove it. This isn't going to be like practice out here on Airline Drive. That's the real deal, and that's still a huge question mark.
Yeah, I think Mina Kimes posted this the other day, that Derek Carr, when he was operating in a clean pocket last year, had like a 71 QBR, which was like top 10 in the NFL. And then when he was under pressure, he had like a 9.6.
I know. Right. And teams know that.
So
they come after him. You see it all the time.
So it's incumbent on that offensive line to play well. It's incumbent on Clint Kubiak to get him in positions where he's getting rid of the ball quickly. I do think some of the stuff that they're doing with play action is going to be really beneficial for him. Carr had a 116 passer rating last year on play action plays.
No doubt.
He's really good at that. They're running a lot of it in practice right now. But like Kubiak said yesterday, you can't run play action 2nd and 20. So there's a lot of stuff that has to be right for that to really, really work.
Right. And those attention to detail, things like that, we hear everybody praising Kubiak about. That's what's been missing, too, from the offense. It's not just the physical, mistakes, but also they were one of the leaders in the league in holding, one of the leaders in the league in pre-snap penalties. Just a lot of sloppiness that, like he talks about, they're 2nd and 20. Doesn't matter what play
I don't think
call.
we've seen a lot of false starts or anything.
No,
I remember one.
I remember Trevor Penning. I think there was one more false start, but most of their starts and stops are when Kubiak's like, no, break the huddle faster.
Right. Urgency, yeah.
Yeah.
But in general, that was an issue a year ago. And
yeah, for sure.
That goes back to, I think, coaching, but also the players, too. They got to be dialed in.
All right, let's quickly wrap this up because we haven't really spent a lot of time talking about it, but we've kind of referenced it on the pod before. Like, what do you have any sort of feeling at all for what this defense is? I think it's really tough. I think it's really tough to figure out what they are right now. So
right.
we haven't seen Kool-Aid McKinstry. We haven't seen Chase Young. Yeah, we haven't seen a lot of contact between the offensive and defensive lines. So it's really hard to get a gauge of what the defensive line is right now or the offensive line. I just don't know. They took, in my opinion, a pretty big step back last year. They still had I think number 9 scoring defense. They forced a bunch of turnovers, but they played a lot of bad offenses, a lot of bad quarterbacks. And I think they might have taken a bigger step back than we realize. And I'm not sure yet after the practices that we have seen if they are still a really good defense.
Yeah, I think we won't know until they start tackling and rushing and all those things. I mean, it's impossible to evaluate. The offense should have an advantage right now because they're not pass rushing really. So it's hard to say. But I think historically we've seen the track record for Dennis Allen and some of these guys on defense, and I feel pretty strongly that the pass coverage is still going to be elite. I mean, they're all there, and that's the bailiwick of Dennis Allen. I think there's question marks everywhere else.
I think they got better. I said this on the last one, I guess. I think at linebacker they probably got a little better with, because a lot of people have been raving about Willie Gay and his athleticism and size. So they got some depth there they probably didn't have last year. And we've talked about the defensive front. I mean, we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know if they can stop the run. We don't know if they're going to be able to get to the quarterback.
Where'd Willie Gay go to college?
Not sure, man.
I knew he got a Willie Gay reference in there.
Bell's
Willie Gay
gone.
reference.
There it is. Thank you, Norm. They took the bell away from me because I was a little bit too eager ringing it for when Matthew Parrish was here talking about the Washington Commanders.
I will say this. Alan said something the other day that I thought was a good point of like they got to start faster. I know it's easy to say, but I think that feeds into the defensive problems. Is they've been behind, and they haven't had a chance to turn loose and rush the passer. That was a problem a lot last year, especially when they played good teams. They just seemed to get in a hole and were always playing from behind. And
The Lions having 3 touchdowns in the first 7 minutes of the game.
remember that?
Yeah.
And then I think the same thing. It was a little more gradual, the Rams, but I mean they were kind of in a hole and fighting their way back. And they've got to that's got to be better. And maybe that comes with play calling and like you talk about on offense, better script to start the games. But that's got to get better. But I'm with you, man. There's a lot of question marks in the front seven.
All right. Well, we'll have answers for that when they report to training camp, which is late July out in Irvine, California. We are going to bite the bullet for y'all and escape the South Louisiana heat for a month. It's going to be really hard.
Yeah, somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. But until that time, we'll have a bunch more content up for you at NOLA.com. We will be here on the Saints Insider podcast. You can like our channel, subscribe to our channel. We'll be doing a show a week at least. Maybe a little bit more when we get Zach and Matt back. But we'll have a bunch of stuff for you. And we'll try to get Jeff to wear some pants sometime out here.
Not going to happen. You know what I need to get, though? I need to get one of those.
You need to get some longer shorts.
No, I need
maybe some shorts that go down to your ankles that are called pants.
Thomas Picayune, like one of those like silver sun. What do you call those things?
Like a reflector?
Yeah, I need one of those for camp. Can we work on that? Maybe work on that in the budget.
Well, we'll ask John George's if we can get you a branded reflector to tan your chin.
Yeah, for the start of camp.
Yeah. We gotta work on your Q rating on this podcast, anyways.
All right.
All right, that's all we got for today. We will be back sometime next week with a full crew, and let's do it up. Let's enjoy the summer. Thank you guys for listening. I am Luke Johnson with the New Orleans Times Picayune. We got Rod Walker to my right, Jeff Duncan to my left. Norm Bell is producing as always. We appreciate y'all for listening, and we will see you soon.